going to be focusing on investing and Nigeria's capital markets, kicking off with a warning from the Securities and Exchange Commission to beware of a particular firm that is not registered with the SEC. I think it's AfriQuantumX. The SEC put out a notice to that effect to the investing public, saying that they essentially should be careful about, or rather avoid investing with the firm because they are not regulated or registered with the SEC. Over to the FTSE Russell. Global index provider FTSE Russell has added Nigeria to its watch list for a possible reclassification from unclassified to frontier market status. And this, of course, has to do with foreign exchange and a foreign exchange repatriation in and out, or rather out of Nigeria. We've got a whole lot more to discuss. Let's jump into it with Callista Chileke, who, of course, is a consumer goods analyst at ARM. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us in our new studio. I want to start with the FTSE Russell and what you make of them looking at putting Nigeria on this watch list to reclassify the country.
All right. So what we saw 2 years ago was that the FTSE, removed Nigeria from the index as a result of the issues surrounding FX and foreign investors being unable to take the funds take the gains they've made from Nigeria and repatriate it back to their country as a result of FX scarcity. But since that time, we've seen a lot of reforms on the monetary side of things, particularly the FX liberalization policy and the CBN's or the MPC's stance on interest rates being, very tightening, right? And that has, sort of renewed confidence in foreign investors, and that should be a major reason why the FTSE is coming back to say, okay, we've seen these reforms and we've seen how that has played out in terms of FX stability. The exchange rate has been stable so far this year. We can all testify to that. And that is one of the reasons, or the major reasons, as well as the clearance of the FX backlogs. If you remember, the $7 billion FX backlog that was cleared sometime last year. And that is something that the FTSE is looking at and saying, okay, you guys are doing great in this aspect. Why don't we, continue like this, and then we can, put you on a watch list. But that is very, very determinant on if this is sustained. That is the FX stability. Is this going to be sustained? So that's why they're putting Nigeria on a watch list. All
right, let me even read this quote that's here. So, as a result of the recommendations received from the FTSE Equity Country Classification Advisory Committee and the FTSE Russell Policy Advisory Board, the FTSE Russell Index Governance Board has approved the addition of Nigeria on the FTSE watch list for possible reclassification from unclassified to frontier markets status. So, what is the implication for the capital market if we end up going from the watch list and getting reclassified? How do you think that helps things for us?
From the side of foreign investors, we will see them coming back into the market because now they have the assurance that when they bring in their funds, they'll be able to repatriate it because FX is stable, there's FX liquidity, and what we'll be seeing in the capital market, particularly the Nigerian equities market, is we'll be seeing a lot of foreign investors play in that space. Currently, we're seeing a lot of domestic investors, taking the large chunk of participation rates in that, in the Nigerian stock exchange. But if this pulls through, and if we're able to maintain the stability that we're seeing in our foreign exchange, then I guess we could see foreign investors coming back into the market.
Now I want to ask you about the fact, this is the second part of the statement, market participants. I want to ask you about the capital gains tax. All right, so following confirmation from market participants that the previously reported delays in the ability to repatriate, as you just said, from Nigeria and associated foreign exchange queues that resulted in Nigeria being downgraded to unclassified market status from September 23 have been cleared, of course, since the beginning of 2025. So market participants in Nigeria have been talking a lot about this capital gains tax, which could possibly take effect next year. What's your views on what the implications could be if it goes through? Because there's been some opposition to it.
Of course, yes. This all boils down to the reforms that we're seeing I think this is the most reforms we've seen in Nigeria in a long time. Yeah. And this tax overhaul of the change in the tax reforms is very, something that very bold of the government, right? For the CGT, the capital gains tax being tripled basically from 10% to 30%, meaning that for the sale of any Nigerian stock, if it's not reinvested, it's going to be taxed 30%. So what we're going to be seeing, what we think is going to happen is a lot of investors will want to reinvest in order to, sort of remove themselves from the CGT, from the capital gains tax, avoid, or maybe that's not the right word, but the 30%, right? So we see a lot of reinvestment, and that would help to improve liquidity in the market, right? So reinvestment to saturate liquidity, we'll see a lot of transactions in the Nigerian stock markets.
Okay, now from there, let's go to the SEC. And, again, I don't know how the SEC is able to monitor all these players in the sector offering investments, especially. Yeah, it's tough. But, I'm just hearing of this company for the first time. So, the Commission hereby informs the public that AfriQuantumX is not registered by the Commission either to solicit investments from the public or operate in any capacity within the Nigerian capital market. I guess the importance of being able to evaluate investments before going in there, that whole dynamic. I mean, you guys are asset managers yourself over at ARM. So what do you make of this development here?
A lot of people have, continued to fall for all these, somewhat Ponzi schemes.
Yeah.
And I think it's the onus of the SEC to, inform the public on potential Ponzi schemes and to just sensitize people on companies that could, pose danger to investment. So that's why at ARM, what we do is we technically or generally advise our clients to look at the company they want to invest in before, putting their money in that space. Because what we'll be seeing in the public with, recently we've had a case and a lot of people lost their money. So before, putting your money in any company, make sure to do your due diligence, and that's what we do at ARM.
Now, I mean, you're on WhatsApp, right? There are so many of these things that pop up everywhere. So what if outside of reaching out to a fund manager to say, please assess, is there any due diligence they can do on their own personally? Is it what else can one do outside of coming to meet up to come and say, hey, can you check this out? Is this legit?
His first step, like the Commission has said, check if it's registered with the SEC, right?
Yeah.
So check if it's registered with SSC. And then there are a lot of different investments anyone can, participate in.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just take one for commercial papers. Take for instance, so company is coming out to, seek for funds, borrow funds from the company. So when you see an investment like that, make sure you do your due diligence in the sense of checking if the company is able to pay you back. In terms of, when they take your money, are they able to pay you back with the interest they've promised you? So look at your financial statement. There are some ratios that you can, check, but you can leave that to us asset managers, right?
Yeah.
And then just check, try to understand the business that's coming to ask you for your money before you give them your money.
All right, let's talk about jobs now. The World Bank putting out a note saying that Nigeria, I think the Democratic Republic of Congo, and some other sub-Saharan players, I think the ones with high populations, could be facing, a big youth job deficit. I think was it 2050? I think or so. What do you make of that warning coming from the World Bank?
It's something that we should listen to. The sense that our population is growing sporadically, right? It's going to double by that, that time frame, 2050, and it's something that we, as a country or our government, should, try to take into account when making their policies. So unemployment is a major indicator of any economy's health, and we've seen the government sort of try to put up some policies or some initiatives to promote growth. But that would, I think a major area they should focus on as a government or as a country is our industries, right? Our industries have the potential to create jobs basically for for the young people, for youth, for Nigerian citizens, and it's something that the government should focus on in order to prevent whatever the World Bank is saying is going to happen by 2050.
All right, so the one thing I've noticed over at ARM, you guys they hire a lot of young people, right? And you're in that demographic. I don't know if I should mention the Gen Zs, right? But from just taking you out as an analyst, that looks at consumer goods and everything else that you look at, as a young person in Nigeria, how have you observed, based on your friends, your own circle, what's your own assessment of youths and jobs in the country right now?
I think a lot of us Gen Zs,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
A lot of us Gen Zs are tilting towards the tech space and the content creation space.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing, a lot of content creators coming up, particularly within sectors fashion, beauty, tech, and that is sort of where the momentum is going towards. And this is great, and we're seeing the government even recognize that content creation, in the sense that they're even taxing the space right now, because they are recognizing it as a means of revenue generation.
We just talked about capital gains tax.
They're taxing it as a means of revenue generation, right? And that is where young people are finding traction in, and a lot of people are doing well in that space.
But they just have to just ramp it up so that you don't end up with this jobs issue that the World Bank is forecasting. Yeah. All right, let's round off with agriculture. It's funny how I haven't mentioned consumer goods. But I think it was in Zaria University, or there's they looked at a survey that essentially said the 2025 wet season for Nigeria was pretty good in terms of output and prices moderating. What do you make of the survey that they've put out there?
Well, of course, typically what we see in terms of food prices is during rainy season or the wet season, like the Ahmadu Bello University has put it, is that food prices tend to taper. And what we've been seeing for most part of the year is food inflation has been, on a downward trend. I think in August 2025, it was at around 22%, right? And that's an offshoot of the, increased food supply that we're seeing, pointing towards the climate that we're in. Currently, we're in the rainy season, and that leads us to the harvest season. So going forward, what we should be seeing is lower food prices, increased food supply, and overall a moderation in food inflation.
So you think that is maintained as we run through the end of the year? Yeah. Fantastic stuff. Callista.
But of course, sorry, just to add, of course, there's still the
headwinds
such as we're entering the festive season, and what we typically see in that space is increased demand, and
so prices
tend to go up. So that would be a risk to our outlook.
Okay, you know what? Since you're a consumer goods analyst, let me just lob one question to you. How just your assessment of the consumer goods space with where we are now?
For the consumer goods sector, it's very buoyant in the sense that companies are thriving, the economy is relatively stable, exchange rate is great.
Yeah.
Oh, not great.
It's stable. It's stable.
It's relatively stable. Yeah. Inflation is moderating, meaning improved consumer purchasing power for their customers, improved revenue generation. The interest rate environment is stable as well. We haven't seen it coming down with the 50 basis points cut by the MPC recently. So all that just points towards it's good for them, and the FX losses are close to almost eliminated, and that should be great for them this year going into next year.
Callista, thank you so much for allowing me to take you around the world with your analysis. Of course, consumer goods analyst over at ARM, Callista Chileke. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.